It's really important for also fans to demand better. Like, you deserve to have generational artists, the next Kendrick, the next Cole, the next Jay-Z, the next whomever. Like, you deserve to have that, but you have to demand that. And if you're willing to take what's essentially considered slop or fluff or whatever noun you want to use, well, that's what they're going to keep feeding you.
Hi, welcome back to The Intersect. I'm your host, Corey Kareen. Today, we're talking about AI in music, for those of us that make it and for those of us who listen to it. And we're joined by music journalist Sowmya Krishnamurthy, who is on the front row of what's happening. Sowmya, welcome to The Intersect.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. We're going to get right into what's happening right now. If someone said to you, AI is coming for music, what does that mean?
So my initial response would be, I'm ready to fight it. But then I would take a breath and, center myself and understand that the music business is like every other industry. Every industry right now is just full throttle into AI. But no one really knows what exactly that means. And I think that the music business has this very sort of tenuous relationship when it comes to technology. Because if you remember the Napster wars of the aughts, we later go into iTunes and the way it totally changed the landscape. So I think a lot of labels, a lot of the heavyweights, they're like, look, we don't want to be left behind. And we definitely want to make sure that we're monetizing from day one. So I think that's why you're seeing so many labels and artists really trying to wrap their heads around what's going on. But here's a little spoiler alert. Nobody knows what's going on. So it's a lot of just waiting and seeing with bated breath.
If you had to explain that to someone who didn't work in the business, who had no idea that there was AI in music in any way, how would you explain it?
I would say right now it's really kind of a brave new world where we don't know what this is going to be. I think the biggest fear is that AI artists are going to replace your favorite singers and rappers and producers and songwriters. So basically make human beings obsolete. And in this sort of, Black Mirror-esque world, there could be a time where you, fire up your streaming platform and it has music specifically meant for you. But instead, I would tell creatives, like I tell myself, AI, we don't know what the future is. So it's best to just take a breath, calm down. Getting stress lines and wrinkles aren't going to help nobody. So let's do that. And really look at it as a potential tool. And I think the biggest thing is about regulations, guardrails, figuring out how we can use tools in a way that's productive versus destructive. But I always think of the music business because it's two words, like music and business.
It's a business.
It is a business and a very lucrative business for a very small group of people. But I do think that there's also the music component. And we can't forget that music, like all forms of art, is supposed to make you feel something. And if it merely is, dissecting everything down to data points or the algorithm, I don't think that makes you feel anything. So for those true artists out there, even people who want to work in the industry, don't forget the artistry.
AI is infiltrating all kinds of music. Velvet Sundown, for example. Mm-hmm. And to my great surprise, gospel music. I saw a headline about a Christian artist. The current number one Christian artist has no soul. Solomon Ray, who is
great headline.
Not a real guy, not a real singer. He is an AI. And he sings some rendition of like Silent Night that's quite moving. If Solomon had you feel something, is it really music? But he's also sort of a ripoff maybe of some other artist. There's a question about artist rights within that. What sort of sticks out for you? Like what does all this mean?
Yeah, I think there's bigger existential issues about, religion and what's real and what's not. But I think that's a different podcast. Totally different podcast.
Yeah.
But I do think that you made a very good point. What we've seen so far is AI is derivative of existing work. So that means that it's taking probably from, and I haven't heard this artist, but maybe it is like a little bit of, Kirk Franklin, a little bit of Winans. Let's mix in, a little bit of commissioned. Hey, look, I created this. Yeah, but those were individuals who all had their own style and developed it. And of course, when it comes to art, everyone is inspired. When you hear a young artist, oh, that's the next Michael, or that's the next Aretha. Like, this is even how people talk in the industry. Like, people like to have some sort of a peg and a reference point. But I think there's a difference between someone who put in the work to create their artistry, their craft, versus someone kind of, behind a screen concocting it. And, even though you said that you listened to this artist, their rendition of Silent Night was very moving, the minute you found out that they weren't real, there's that visceral reaction. And that's a good thing. My concern is we're going to get to a point where there no longer is a visceral reaction. And in our mind, AI, whether it be in the music business or otherwise, it becomes a substitute for humanity and for human beings. And that would be I think, a very dark place. And that's something where, to me, that's where the real conversation should be happening, because human beings are still human. And if we are trying to find sort of substitutes, and even if it isn't a race to the bottom line, what is the ultimate cost?
Well, let's get into some of the economics. Who is most at risk in this?
So that's yet to be seen. But usually in the music business, although the artists create the art, they usually tend to be kind of at the end of the economic food chain. And there's a reason the music industry has not a great reputation when it comes to compensation, rights, artists signing predatory contracts, even all the way to 2026, right? These aren't things, despite all the cautionary tales and examples. Usually your first deal is like a bum deal. It's like the worst deal you're going to sign because people just don't have leverage. And I think the problem here, if I take a step back and I look at merely just the economics, there's a handful of companies right now controlling AI. And to me, the problem is too much leverage is in their favor. And so you take, a very small group of companies, then we get into the majors. There's only a handful of major labels. Like even when I was a kid growing up, we had more majors, but because of consolidations, acquisitions, things like that, we just have fewer players in the room. So to me, when it comes to kind of who has the true power outside of maybe a handful of that 1% artists, Taylor Swift, Kendrick, The Weeknd, people who have enough power to say, hey, I can walk away from a deal, or I can sort of twist the label's arm a little bit, because even though they may own the master or have some sort of distribution rights, if I say something, my fans will kind of follow what I say. But right now, too much power, I think, is in a very consolidated group of a small number of companies. So in my mind, if the end game is to make music more efficient, cheaper, faster, get to market as soon as possible, the artists are going to suffer. We've seen with every new implementation of technology, usually the money doesn't get better for the artists. You see from when the physical product went into streaming, if you sold 1 million records back in the 90s or 2000s, you could have a decent living. And based upon the kind of advance you got, you might have earned out of your advance. Now it takes billions of streams to even come close to that. And that is really relegated to the smallest group of already established artists, unfortunately. So when it comes to the money, my biggest fear is always about the creatives who are, even if they're not creating the AI, it's their work and their previous work that it's being built on and sort of like the machine has been trained on.
It's already hard for artists to find audiences. It just strikes me that AI in the mix, it's just more content is created and that makes it harder for discovery. Or how do you think about just AI within the sort of mix of artists' music?
Previously, what the labels and the industry really controlled was distribution. As an artist, you'd be the greatest artist in the world. You were not getting your record in a store, specifically those big box retailers, or even if, I'm dating myself, like Sam Goody, Virgin Megastore, like those type of places, you just weren't getting stock there. So as an artist, you had to sign, and the industry controlled that distribution. When we moved to, the internet, social media, now we are in streaming, it's not imperative to be signed. You absolutely can sign to a distribution company where you're handling all of your rights. And for a very small fee, maybe like a monthly subscription, they're enabling you to get onto a Spotify or Apple Music and things like that. So with that, we saw just a proliferation of releases. So right now, Friday is new release day. And I spent some time with SoundCloud, and I actually launched curation, which is playlisting for them. And part of my job was populating and programming the hip hop playlist. I kid you not, on a Friday from like midnight to let's say 8 a.m., I probably got like 100, 150 releases every week.
Wow.
And as a journalist, I actually listened to them because that was important to me. But most people don't do that. And just think about the flood of music. And even for fans, there was a time you would go to the record store. Back then it was Tuesday. That was release day. Buy the CD, take it home, open it up. It used to like ravage my nails, but it was worth it. You might spend months to even years with one album, soaking it in, listening to it, reading the liner notes, looking at all the photography, and even artists just had a longer runway. So you really sat with music in a different way. But now if 100 records are dropping every Friday, and that's just in one genre, if I open it up to every genre, I don't know, it's probably hundreds, if not like 1,000, right? And how are you supposed to sort of rise to the top? I see it's going to be two different, almost groups of artists. You're going to have that 1% of established artists. They're going to get the eyeballs, the ears, the attention, the opportunities. They're going to be fine. And especially if they've established themselves already, I think they'll be fine moving forward. But what about that next artist? Like, who is that next Taylor Swift? The next Kendrick, the next Beyonce? Will this person even be discovered? Or will there just be so much out there, including a lot of AI slop? How are you supposed to come through that noise? And even when you do, if I'm thinking like, an executive, well, we don't need you. Because not only are you expensive, but you also have all those human feelings. And you have mental health stuff and family stuff, and you need to take days off. Whereas this AI avatar doesn't have any of that. And we're getting a little too creepy territory, I can make them do anything and
Right.
say anything and speak to any audience instead of...
They don't turn down brand deals that aren't aligned.
They don't turn down anything.
Yeah.
And to me, again, that can start to get just really unsettling. But even on kind of the more, let's say, optimistic, positive front, just the fact that why do we need to sign an artist when you have all of these other human elements? But that's what makes them a great artist. Going through heartache, going through real life situations, dealing with happiness, dealing with grief. When that funnels into music, that makes real art versus kind of us contriving something just so we can push out as much product as possible and just make as much money as possible.
Let me ask you then if, and I've heard this argument and I think about it a lot. It's like, how do you have real human connection through art if it's not being made in some way by a human? And by the way, the human experience is like love and loss and pain and suffering and like joy. It's messy. And so all of that comes through art, and that's how we find meaning. What do you think about artists? Should they embrace some of these things? I mean, like, I don't know, the synthesizer, people were very upset about that way back in the day, right?
Yeah,
like, it's not music.
Auto-tune, MPC. I mean, especially when you look at hip-hop sampling. I mean, a lot of people thought, well, you're not playing those records. You're taking Quincy, you're taking Herbie Hancock and taking a piece of it, sometimes crediting them, sometimes not, and making it your own. So I do think that technology has been used in innovative ways, interesting ways. But when it comes to the creative, I wouldn't shame anyone per se, but I would ask them a question like, what exactly is it helping you with? So, for example, the singer Teddy Swims, he came out recently and mentioned that he has used AI in the studio. It just kind of helps cut down his time of having to do vocal takes over and over again. But I would say to him, but you're talented. Like, I know he can sing. Why would you do that? And this idea of saving time, this is your job. Like, what else are you doing?
What are you doing, Teddy, but not singing?
And I also find it really funny because in my mind, if we're supposed to believe like the Jetsons and all the great futuristic propaganda we were given, AI should cut down on mundane tasks so we can go do our art. Not cut down on art so we can do what? More mundane tasks? That's what it kind of feels like. So you want us to not focus on art that's like enriching ourselves and our world to go what? Go into the data mines? Like, I don't even know like what the end game is with that. So that would be my thing. Like, for me as a writer, could I go into like ChatGPT and just say, here, write me a book about this topic? Yes, but one, it wouldn't have my experiences, my mindset, my voice, the way I would sort of frame things. But also, that's your job.
Yeah.
So what exactly is the shortcut here? And, recently in R&B, there was an AI artist, and I'm using that in heavy quotes if people can't see, called Zania Monet. This came through Suno, who's been actively pumping out these AI artists. And the creator came forward and said, look, like I'm a writer, but I'm not a singer. And I don't know this woman, I'm sure she's very nice. But to me, my answer is then you don't need to sing.
Mm.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to play in the NBA because I'm not tall at all. So this idea, well, I should create an AI to go up against LeBron. No, you really shouldn't. But you can enjoy it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think that becomes the issue too, is if she's this great songwriter, go be a songwriter. Like we need amazing songwriters, especially, young women coming up in this industry. So that's the other part of it. Like, I have a saying, like, everything ain't for everybody. And that's okay. Everyone doesn't need to be a singer. Everyone doesn't need to be a rapper. Everyone doesn't need to be like an artist. There's absolutely nothing wrong. But I feel like AI and other forms of technology, it's almost like everything has to turn into content and ultimately be monetized. And sometimes that's just not the case.
So this artist, Sowmya Monet, she actually got signed, yeah?
So that was a huge headline in the music industry. And I had to put on my journalist cap for a minute. Like, something about this, the math just isn't mathing to me. Like, why would this person be signed? So I did a little bit of just kind of cursory digging. And she was signed to a company. It's kind of like a holistic label management, all encompassing. But they have business deals with Suno. And that's my sort of hypothesis right now. AI companies across the board, they need a case study. So they're actively finding ways to kind of generate these headlines because it's splashy. It sounds amazing that an AI artist signed a $3 million deal. Yes, but sub-headline should be with a company that's actively involved with an AI company. And I think that's something where I really challenge journalists, the media, fans to kind of look under the hood a little bit. And even with a lot of these sort of headlines about this artist has topped this chart or that chart, check which chart that is, because I read the Billboard charts every week and I don't see these names. So a lot of it is like the iTunes chart, like some of these charts, little industry insider, you could just buy 3,000 copies of your record. It's not that expensive. And say, I topped a chart. And only people who know, we're the ones raising an eyebrow. But to the general public, it looks like, this great form of like social proofing. Like, oh my God, it's a hit. It's signed. And this is another thing I really urge people because so much of our industry has really turned into the deals. And everything has become an industry trade. And people will just drop, I signed this deal, that deal. You had a deal worth that much. You are not seeing that. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think we have to also be much more discerning.
It's funny money. This isn't real.
It's funny money. It's probably in like stock or it's in an advance that you got to pay back. For those that don't know, an advance means you have to pay it back. It's a loan. But more than anything, we shouldn't be so excitable. And just because we're seeing these headlines, go listen to the records. I listened to those Zania Monet records. They're not good. It is what it is, right? And at some point,
do you think some people would think it was good though, or good, or wouldn't even it wouldn't clock that it wasn't?
I mean, they pay me the big bucks for my taste, so
that's
maybe
right.
I'm coming
You're
in at an elite level.
Taste.
Yeah, my elite level of taste. Music journalists were just like known for that.
No, you guys are tough.
Yeah, we actually are. We're kind of haters, professional haters.
That's right.
So maybe like an average person may not be able to, but I also have a lot of faith in fans. Like, to me, you may be able to get past like for a little bit, but at some point you take a step back like, okay, these songs are very the titles look almost like too on the nose, like someone who's trying to become a meme, trying to go viral on TikTok. And, the proof will be in the pudding the minute this artist can't do an interview.
I see.
And I was actually pitched, interestingly enough, Zania Monet. So like publicists are working this project.
To interview her?
I don't know what it would have been. Probably talking to the creator, like behind this person.
Okay.
And I forgot who it was, but they're like, is this any different than like a Milli Vanilli, for example? And, one could argue that for those who don't remember, this was that group out of Europe. They were basically amazing dancers and just really good looking guys. I believe they're from Germany, but the producer behind them like created all their music. There was a whole like vocal band and instrumentalist who actually sang, those hit records. Blame It on the Rain, Girl You Know It's True, all that stuff. And when people found out their Grammy was rescinded, it was incredibly embarrassing.
Fraud. Oh my God, they've been lying to us.
They
They're
were lying
just
to us.
acting.
But just imagine now, people might say, yeah, but they could dance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And somebody made the music behind the scenes, but it's like we almost kind of need that level of outrage, from like the 80s and 90s to come back where
Are we going to have it? Are we going to have some kind of like moment where watershed where we're like, oh my God, this is all, we need to go back to real artistry, or that or we just like the slop is just a wash and there's nothing we can do?
I think a lot of that goes back to first the gatekeepers. For those of us, it is our job to be stewards of whatever art that we're supposed to be stewards of. It starts with us. So if you're going to lay down and roll around in the slop, like, I'm sorry, like you're just another pig to me, right? Going with that barnyard analogy, but also fans. And again, I'm someone who I've never believed in like talking down to fans or that fans don't know. Cause I used to be a fan. Like before getting into the industry, I was just a kid who loved rap records. And only after listening to like the best of the best, I'm like, oh, that's what it should sound like. Got it. Because we always had one hit wonders or, what's the term now? Industry plant, someone who's kind of concocted and manufactured. But the genuine, what resonates in a real, meaningful, visceral way, I don't think that comes, even in like a boardroom or with a bunch of like tech bros. And when you listen to some of the greats, it's not even of how perfect it is, it's how imperfect. It's when the voice like just cracks just a little bit. Or, it's like a Marvin Gaye record. You hear people talking in the background, or you hear the instrumentalist kind of riffing a little and going something a bit off. Like the scale doesn't go that way, but I like it. Keep going. And I love that. Like, to me, that's what it should be about. It shouldn't be about, okay, we'll take sort of the ingredients that look like they make sort of the perfect cake and put it together. Because sometimes those ingredients will not be good, And I think it's really important for also fans to demand better. Like, you deserve to have generational artists. Like, I know right now everyone wants like nostalgia, and there's a reason old artists are doing so well. And I love that for them. But you guys deserve your own, the next Kendrick, the next Cole, the next Jay-Z, the next whomever. Like, you deserve to have that, but you have to demand that. And if you're willing to take what's essentially, throw away what's essentially considered slop or fluff or whatever noun you want to use, well, that's what they're going to keep feeding you. So if you want a good meal that's going to stick to your ribs, then you need to demand that and pay for that, not just financially going to shows and buying merch and things like that, but also your attention. This is the attention economy, and one of the most powerful things we have is our attention. You don't got to click on everything. You really don't. You don't got to listen to everything. You are allowed to also be your own internal gatekeeper and demand excellence and demand goodness because you deserve it.
How are these publishers and labels pushing back on all of this AI?
So every label has sort of its own, deals and things going on. But if we take a step back, it kind of feels like in the beginning, everyone had a lawsuit. And you see that against Suno specifically. And, the Universal Suno lawsuit, that case is still pending. But Warner, another major label, signed an agreement with Suno. So to me, it almost feels like in the beginning, it's a hard line of we're going to fight you because at the end of the day, we own the music. We own the masters. Whether, the artists, some of them are in kind of traditional deals, some of them are in distribution deals, like it's still our IP to exploit. And then over time, it's okay, once we figure out the terms, now we'll be bedfellows. And it's a strange place to be because on one hand, I understand where the labels are coming from because their mentality is if you can't beat them, join them. I would argue you can also beat them because you have money, right? Now, individual artists don't have the money to sue these big companies. And one trend I've seen in tech, it's this idea of, ask for forgiveness later or never.
Or never.
So we're just going to go steal your shit. And if you sue us, like come for us. And that mentality, if that's who I'm negotiating against, at least where I come from, you have to have a little bit more of like a tougher heart than just sort of rolling over and sort of submitting to their demands. So labels are in a tricky place right now. In fact, I just read the memo from Lucian Grange, the CEO of Universal. A good chunk of that memo is about AI and about, signing deals that are ethical and we can monetize it, et cetera, et cetera. And, we hope that the labels are going to be protective of their IP, but we see it in everything. We see it in Hollywood. We see it in so many industries where sadly, I think when it comes to tech companies, people oftentimes just feel like we can't beat them. So let's try to join them and lose as less of our money and dignity as humanly possible. But to me, I'm like, you still own the IP. You have the artists. No tech company is like signing, developing, breaking artists. Like, despite what they'll tell you, no superstar is being broken on like one platform. It's still a holistic industry coming together. And I've been in those rooms. Like, you don't have ears. Like, no one here's a music person. So at the end of the day, I think the industry, the music business should also kind of be strong in what they're supposed to be fighting for and who they're supposed to be fighting for, and don't lose sight of that.
Okay, stand your ground. Heard loud and clear. Sowmya Krishnamurthy is a music journalist who's written everywhere from Rolling Stone to the BBC. Sowmya, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.